Alright guys, so today what we're going to do is do a little texture blending. In this case, it's to create the effect of, uh, rust and stuff spreading over an object over time if you want to do some kind of time lapse or something like that. What I have here is just a little prop that I'm using for a project where the, the texture is going to get rusty or whatever over time. So what we get in the end is something like this. You can see the rust sort of coming on there. So we're just going to do it. Simple way to do it using different nodes in the node editor. So let's go into that. First thing you got to do is have at least two versions of the texture. Okay, so what that means is if I do a render here, one sec. If I run a render, so this is the quote unquote clean version. Okay, right here. And then if I set this control to 1, it's going to render again, except now it's the more rusty, sort of worn down version. Okay, so you need those two, at least two. Now you can have more than two, but you need at least two. Okay, so if I bring down my hyper shade here, you can see this is the first little clean one, and this is the weathered one right here. Okay, so you need to just set them up like you would any other shader. I'm not going to go into that. I'm sure you guys know how to do that. Just set up two shaders. And the way that you then assign them to the object is using a mix shader. So on Arnold, if you go to AI, where is it? AI mix shader right here. Okay, so a mix shader, all that does is that you apply the mix shader to the object, and all you got to do is take your shaders, out color into each of these right here, just like that, and then you have a mix value here. So the mix weight is right here. You can either go to 0 or 1, right? When it's 0, it's all the way to one side, to one shader. When it's at 1, it's all the way to the other. And then if you're in somewhere in between, you're blending between the two. Okay. Now, the way I've set it up here is very simple, straightforward version. It just basically goes between 0 and 1 in a linear fashion, and sort of fades from one into the other. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now, if you really wanted to make it more interesting, what you could do is add an animated mask texture in here so that you tell it, which parts to come on at what time and whatnot. You can do that here, but we're just going to keep it simple here. So now the way that I connected it all to a control, right? I have a control here that I just use because in my case, this is part of an environment, and the whole environment is sort of weathering down over time. So what I've done is I've put it all onto one control, and that way I can just use that control to run all of those at the same time. But really, you could put on anything. You could put on the geometry if you wanted to. You could, whatever it is. So I like to put things on controls just to make it easy. So all I've done here is I've gone into the node editor. So let's see, Windows node editor right here. Let's get rid of this. Okay, so here's the control here, and here's my mix shader, right? So if I bring this back here, see, there's a mix shader. I've just loaded it in here. So really what I could do with this new one here is just select that and then come in here and add it. Right, so here's the new mix shader. Oops. So then what you got to do here, as you can see, I have a mix here and I don't have one here. And I've created an attribute on my control, right? So over on this thing, I just go to, let's kill the render. All we got to do is go click on this out of the way, click on this, go to modify, add attribute, right? Then you can add whatever attribute you want. In this case, mine was pod texture wear. So that's gonna add that attribute to my texture control right here. Then all you got to do is take that attribute and plug it in here. You're going to get this drop down, go to other, and go to mix. Right, so now it's going to plug that into the mix. So all that is, because it's an attribute, it's a float attribute, right? If we go again here to modify, oh, wrong one. We go to modify, add attribute, right? I just used a float that runs from 0 to 1. Okay, so that's all you need to put on there. And that way, when it's 0, it'll be all the way to one texture. When it's 1, it'll be all the way to the other texture. Okay, so that would then plug in there. And now you would apply the mix shader, right? So once you got that, you take the mix shader and apply it to the geometry. You wouldn't apply these two. You would apply the actual mix shader. And then that would allow you to switch back and forth between the two. Okay, so it's a pretty simple process. Now, if you had more than two textures that you wanted to go between, then all you do is from when you come out of the first mix shader, then you would take this in another one, and then this say this was your third one, then you would go like that, and you can just keep doing that, just keep adding more, so that as you blend between the first two, when you finish that blend, then you start the next one, and so on and so forth. So that's how you would keep adding more levels to this. Okay, and again, if you wanted to make this a little bit more so easier or nicer, not easier but nicer, instead of plugging in that 0 to 1 attribute here, you might plug in an animated sequence that's a mask for the blending, so that you can blend different parts at different rates and what have you. Okay, so that'll just make it a little bit more complicated, but not really that much. But that's what you get, and when you're done, you get that blending effect. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next one.